Guys, so in this video we are gonna walk through how to set up a portfolio site. So I got a request basically that stated that, Frederick, can you make a video about how to set up a portfolio site and what sort of stuff should we add to our portfolio sites? So I figured that, sure, I'll show you how to set up a basic site that should be fairly cost effective. We're going to use an EC2 instance from Amazon. There are other ways that you could do this. It's just that Amazon probably is, at least in my opinion, one of the more flexible options out there, but you can use whatever you want. But in this scenario, we're going to do it from scratch with an EC2 instance. So the first thing you want to do is that you want to create yourself an Amazon account, and going through that process is outside of the scope of this video because it should be a straightforward process for you. You simply go sign up for an account, fill out your information, and you should have something similar to this. Now, do remember that you can pick different regions up here, so depending on where you want to actually host your instances, you should pick whichever suits you most. So after that, you'll notice that I have already created an instance here. It's just because I want to save some time. I've already set this up, and it will just save time because otherwise we're going to have to sit here and kind of wait until all of this stuff is done. So let's create an instance. So as you can see here, first step is to just select which type of image we want, basically what base operating system we're going to run. And there's tons of stuff to pick from. I usually go with the Ubuntu one because it's this thing that is most familiar to me. And then we have a bunch of different instance types that we can pick between. For our case here, it's going to be fine with the micro. Well, you could probably even go with a nano if you wanted to. But the reason we want to just use something basic like the T3 micro is because the application we're building is like very, very lightweight. It's not going to be a heavy, big system. And we don't really have any strong requirements on high uptimes or availability or anything like that. And this is free tier eligible, which means that we can actually run this for, I think it's 12 months, up until before we actually have to before we have to pay for the computation time that we're using. Even then, it's like not that much money, but it's good to be thrifty, I believe it's called. And here we can set up the instance details. The one thing I like to do when I create something as simple as this is just to remove the 2.3 and T3 unlimited, which is just allows you to go beyond your CPU usage if you were to actually need it. But we don't, since this is such a very, very small, simple application. Then we need to add some storage. Since it's not a very sophisticated system, we're just going to keep it as is. We can do, we could encrypt it and like a few other things here, but let's just stick with 8 gigabytes. It's going to be more than enough for our intent. We don't need to tag this up. We need to configure a security group on the other hand, as you can see here. So we kind of need to, like a security group, just to keep it brief, is just the rule set that we configure so that we tell the instance which connections are okay and it's firewall rules. That's basically what it is. And the default is going to be that you allow SSH connections on port 22. Now, this is very important because if you don't have this, you can't actually work with your instance. Or, well, you can use, I think you can still use, Amazon provides a web version of this, but this is the standard practice. You create an SSH port. Now, ideally, you don't really want to expose your SSH port to everybody like this. This is listening on all interfaces and all the IP addresses. What you want is to select my IP here so that you can at the very least restrict SSH access to this instance down to your home network or whichever network you want to use. So that, because if you don't do that, odds are that there will be some script kiddie out there on the internet or some more serious pen testers who wants to have a bit of fun, and they just randomly scan for ports that are open on instances that are open on port 22, and there you are, and then they can actually start brute forcing you. So you can create your own rule and just follow the wizard, but I already have a rule here that I like to have the naming convention kind of like what I try to express or what it does. As you can see here, it's public HTTP, private SSH, and that's pretty much it really. So review and launch, and this looks so great, all of these things. Let's launch it. And then the last thing before you can actually launch your instance is to say, all right, choose an existing key pair or create a new key pair. Now a key pair is just an asymmetric key, or in my case it's an RSA key that allows me to SSH into the instance. Like this is just a security thing, guys. I have an already existing one, but I can also create a new key pair where either I import it or I let Amazon produce it for me, and then I just grab it down to my local computer. We can look at how that looks as well. But after that step, the instance will actually start up. So let's just go to EC2, the EC2 tab again. And let's look at the instances. So what you would see after you did that is practically that this screen here would have an instance, and then you can fill out the name. And something that I like to do for these for micro instances, this is just a bit of experience talking here. There is a tendency when you're on the free tier like this to get your resources limited depending on which machine they are running your instance on. So a nice thing I like to do is to create an alarm where I basically just stay, we can look at my alarm setting here. No, not CloudWatch. It's not CloudWatch. It is, let's see here. Here we are. So what I like to do is to simply set up a watcher that will reboot the instance if it finds more, if this status check, the basic status check that Amazon provides free of charge without CloudWatch or anything like that, if it fails like for half an hour or something like that, it's going to just restart the instance, and then like hopefully it's gonna jiggle something in place. As I said, this is not how you would do this if you were to set up like a company website or something like that. This is for basic, simple projects. So once we've gotten to the step where we actually have our SSH keys, we want to be able to SSH into our instance. So I've set up an alias here, which is like, well, practically this is the same thing as this thing here. So your default user is going to be Ubuntu on the Ubuntu machine. So if we SSH into Ubuntu at that path, hey, we're in our instance. Nice. And as you see here, I've already grabbed the portfolio project. So let's go back to that. So this is just a basic setup project that I created to host all the things that I need and some scripts that I need in order to set up the machine. So the first thing we need to do is to SSH into the instance. The second thing we need to do is to run this command where we want to install NVM. Like you don't have to install, because basically we need Node. You don't have to install NVM per se, but I did it this way because, hey, Amazon recommended it, and it doesn't really matter how you get it in there. So what we can do is we can just run this command, and it should pull down all the things for us. And yeah, it's gonna say that it's already installed. Yes, all the things is already installed. Nice. And then we can, well, usually you need to you create a new shell or something like that for the command nvm to actually take hold, but I already have it. So as you can see here in the second step, they're going to add a few lines to your bash rc file, which is, let's see here, bash rc. These NVM is going to append these lines so that you can actually load up the NVM script whenever you start a new shell. So to just take care of that, you can source the bash rc file so that the command is actually there. And you should see something like this, NVM version, and here is all the stuff that you need. Now my specific setup is going to be hard-coded to 14.5 of Node. So you can just run that. The reason is very simple, because when we then store node on the system, it's going to be put in the nvim directory, and my little run script here has just an absolute path to the node binary, like so. You don't have to do it this way, it's just how I did it, and you can follow along if you want. So once we have installed it, we should see something like this. Yes, 14.5, and we should have npm installed. Nice. Cool. So the next step is to just make sure that we have git installed, which is by default installed. And then we can clone this little repository. And I mean, you will obviously have your own repository. This is just mine. So just cloning that repository is going to leave us with the portfolio. So let's go into the portfolio. So if we list out the files we have here, the first thing we want to do here is to install all of our dependencies. I actually think yes, I forgot to add that as a step. We should actually have another step here, which should be, no, it should be here. It should say run npm I, like so, 9, 10, 11, 12, like so. And then we can just persist that, hey, live coding. Right, so once we have installed all of our dependencies and we have our node modules, we should be able to start up the server. Now we can try to just do something like this. We can say node server.js, and that's going to be, it's going to be broken because I'm actually already running a server, but we can say port 3001, just like that, and yeah, and now we actually see that, hey, the server is actually running. So the next step in our process here is to make the run script and the setup script executable. And the reason why is because the run script is the script that I use together with systemd, which is basically just the way we set up a service in the Ubuntu instance. And a service, for those of you who may not know it, is just something that is going to run in the background. It's just a process that's going to run on the system. And you need to set that up if you want your restarts and stuff of that nature to actually still start up your portfolio site. So because if you just start it like I just did, that's not going to work, because then you need to keep this SSH session to your remote instance. So what you want is to actually start the process in the background, and then you want to make sure that if the instance restarts for some reason, if you reboot it, it actually starts up again. And that's why we need to add a service unit to systemd. You can go and look into systemd yourself because it's a much bigger topic than what's in scope for this tutorial. So once we made this executable, this script is then going to be used by our service declaration. And then we have our setup script here. Let's just walk through that. So if we look at my README file here, the next step is to run the setup script. So let's just walk through line by line here. So by running this, we're going to copy my service unit to etc systemd system. This is the folder where we put our service declaration. So this is our service declaration for systemd, where we declare a unit and a description. It just says portfolio because it's a portfolio, our portfolio service. And then we declare that we want this to start, we have a dependency to the syslog target. And I'm not going to go into like what targets are and so forth, but you can look at this as once system logs are up and running and they're available to us, then we can start this up. And then we declare our service itself, where we set our rules for the service, and we say that, all right, if the service, it should restart on failure, and it should delay 5 seconds before it restarts, so that it doesn't just spam it, like it just gives it a little bit of a delay. And here is that script that I was talking about. So we are just going to run the run script, like so. No, that's not the run script. This script here, we're just going to reference that, and we're going to run that whenever systemd starts up the service. And then finally we're going to spin all of this up once we get to the well, this is boot stages. No, let's skip that. Like you can just think of multi-user.target as another thing you should go and look up with systemd if you want to get deep into what a boot target actually is, or what a target actually is. So once that is done, the next thing is to use systemd or system control, which is the command for systemd, to enable the service. So and all you do is that you sudo and you say system control enable portfolio service, and this script is just taking care of this for us. So this is just enabling the service, and you have to enable the service because what that basically means is that it's going to, next time the system restarts, so if you restart this instance, it's going to spin up this service that we have created. It's just going to run the script basically on boot time. And start is something you explicitly have to say if you want to start the server here and now, if you want to run that service immediately. And then lastly, this is a little bit optional. I like to do this. You don't have to if you want to be a little bit insecure. You could do something like this. You can say sudo and actually run it as super user. The reason why I recommend that you don't do that is because if you have a process that you have run, if you've run a process with sudo, you've in effect created a process that is running as root or as the super user. And that's not a good thing if you create a portfolio site where someone might be able to hack you, because if they can get access to your server in some fashion, then they will run in that process as the root user. And that's sort of dangerous because then they have access to do quite a lot of stuff. So what I like to do is that I like to reroute the incoming requests from port 80 to another port which is okay to run, because you can't run on port 80 unless you are the super user. So what I do is that I create a firewall rule where basically we just go to the NAT table where we can declare the pre-routing. We can set the rules for the pre-routing, which is just saying that, all right, before you actually hit the destination that you're going to, you do this. That's the short version of this. So we say that for the protocol TCP, and when the destination port is 80, then we create a rule where we say, okay, we're going to create a redirect rule, and anything that tries to goes to port 80, let's send that packet to port 3000 instead. So that way we can run our node server on port 3000, but the firewall will route all incoming traffic on port 80 to port 3000, or what it will. So I hope that makes sense to you. We're simply redirecting the packets. Right, and that is pretty much how to set up all of this stuff. Now the problem with using IP tables like this and like adding a firewall routing rule like that is that it's not going to be persistent, so it's not going to stick around when you restart the system. So what you should do here is that you should update your package manager, and then you can install iptables persistent, which is just just a program that will help you take care of persisting these rules, and it will automatically load up this custom iptables rule that you added. And then you just prompt when it's going to ask you, like, do you want to do this? And you just say yes, and that's the whole story, right? So now, if we go to my instance, it's going to say hello world, because my application, this tiny little application here, has a single endpoint that says hello world. And this is where you would, I mean, if you're making your own portfolio site, depending on how you want to make it, you might want to make some type of landing page where you have all of these nice, like, you know, some presentation or something like that. Ideally, in my experience, the best thing for you to do is to just go for something that is visually stunning, something that looks really nice, and then you can just link to the different demo sites that you have created. Now, I have 2 demo sites that I have taken from, let's see here. Yeah, here it is. So I just literally searched for website templates, and this was the first, literally the first thing. I just clicked. There's no, like, it doesn't matter what you pick. And then you provide you with all of the static assets that you want. And for like a junior level product or something like this, this is pretty much what you can expect for the most part. So if I go to /tutor, which is that directory, you'll see here that, hey, here is my demo sites and it's available on the internet. And then there are some agreements that you have to abide by, like not remove the footer and stuff like this, because some people have actually put some time into making this. And then we can see here, see pressure washing. Pressure washing. And here we have the pressure washing website. It looks great. So this is pretty much all you need to do in order to have a website. Now this Amazon host name isn't really, like, I mean, this URL isn't really super nice, so and that's kind of out of scope, but you can of course buy your own domain, and then you can change this domain for your own domain if you wanted to. But if you're just making some basic products where you want to add some stuff to a CV or something like that, linking to a pre-made URL like this is perfectly fine if you're short on cash or you don't want to set all of that stuff up. Now, the last part of this question was what should we include in a portfolio site? Now, the problem with answering that question is that it depends on what you want to achieve. If you're creating portfolio sites, I will tell you right now that the best thing is for you to, of course, host some of your own projects. But the reality is that depending on who you're going to show your portfolio sites to, it doesn't really matter. If your ambition is to be like a freelancer, or you're just starting out and you want to get some small contracts or like freelance work with smaller businesses, you can literally do this thing here, like what I did. You can just create some type of landing page that references, ideally with a bunch of images, because images are like people buy with their eyes. So this thing here looks absolutely, I mean, it looks great. And I can promise you that if I showcase this to small business owners, they would have no idea that they wouldn't understand that I haven't made it. Because like all they do is that they look at, for the most part, at the visuals. They don't reflect it because they don't know enough about systems development to understand that, hey, this is a template site that literally took me 2 clicks, I think. 1, 2. And then all I do, I get a zip file. We literally get a zip file. Like so. And here is my zip file with literally everything in it. Everything is already done. I don't have to do anything. And then I can copy paste this folder into my public directory and upload this code. I can just clone, I can push this to GitHub and clone it from my instance, and here I have another site added to my portfolio. You can of course add more customization, but this is how lazy you could be, and you will have something that is noteworthy. The thing that I warn you about this, doing something like that, is that if you're selling the idea that you can produce work at this scale, or if you're showcasing stuff, you have to be able to deliver in some fashion. I mean, if you want to work mostly with templates, if you're doing freelance work with smaller businesses, that's fine, because a lot of them will like just look at the template and you can kind of showcase, hey, these are your options, and then they might want to tweak it a little bit. In more serious projects, it's very common that you have designers and you have to build everything from scratch. I don't want you to get into the habit of using templates like this, but if you want to get something up very quickly and you just want something to show to people, I mean, then this is fine. You can just start doing this, but it's not a sustainable solution for you long term. But it will, I can promise you, it's something that will grab people's attention, and it's definitely something that is going to go over well with small business owners. Now, for larger projects, the problem becomes it depends on who's going to do the reviewing. If it's a small business owner or a non-technical person, they will have no idea, unless you're literally all going to watch this video now and start stealing all of the exact same stuff and show the exact same stuff. Nobody's ever going to figure out that this is a template. And the only time that's not true is if you're dealing with someone like myself. If you are if showcasing a portfolio site to go into a real IT company. I mean, even in a real IT company, they may not even notice that, they may not even think about all this all that much. But it doesn't really matter. You don't put so much emphasis on the portfolio site if you're trying to get a job in a real IT company, because the portfolio sites are not as interesting as you might think. They are relevant, they showcase that you have some interest and you so forth. The thing that most of the IT companies are looking for is just that you show an interest in software development, and that you have some cool project or something that you're doing in your own time. So I hope that makes sense. There's a difference between trying to create a portfolio for the sake of drumming up business for your freelance company, and to have portfolio sites to showcase for job purposes where you want to get hired at a real IT company. Because if that's the focus, then like most of this doesn't really matter all that much. There's not that many companies who's going to go and deep dive into all of your portfolio sites. So you can focus on more on creative projects and contributions, and studying like things at the university, or adding things to your GitHub account where you have different projects that you have an interest in, and so forth. So what I want you to take away from this is that this setting up a portfolio project it can be this simple. And for most people, if you're doing freelance work or something like that, you don't actually have to invest like hundreds of hours in creating different custom websites to get something noteworthy to showcase to potential clients. You can go and grab these sorts of templates and just see if people go for it. Even if it's not something that they want, it's still going to be something that is visually effective, because most of the small companies they have simple needs, and most of what they care about is how something looks. If you're dealing, on the other hand, with larger companies, and if you're looking to get into real IT companies, the portfolio sites like this they're fairly trivial. If you gave this to me, and people have, I can spot in a fraction of a second that you haven't built this yourself. It's the same thing that I know when I see, I can tell if something is built with Bootstrap. I can tell if something is built with Gatsby or whatever. And so if you're a junior developer and you think I'm going to get impressed by you practically just using template stuff to build something, that's not going to be all that interesting to me. In that scenario, it's much more interesting for me as the person who's hiring you to see if you actually have real talent. Do you actually have what it takes to build things without too much assistance, if that makes sense? And that's not something that you're going to convey by just using templates and off-the-shelf solutions. But these sorts of things are definitely something that is worth your time. I mean, you can invest in it, just don't expect people to go, ooh, this thing that you made is so beautiful, when I know that you did maybe 10% of the work. Hopefully this makes sense to you. Have a great day.